accrued interest in a transaction. I wanted to comment briefly on some generalizations about yield. Generally, longer maturities are going to yield more than shorter maturities. So if you're willing to buy a bond that's 20 years until maturity, you're probably going to get a little bit more yield on that than you will get on something that's only got 5 years to go to maturity. Poor quality bonds have higher yields than higher quality bonds, and we touched on that earlier. So if you get a bond that's like a B rating or a double B rating, the interest rate on that bond is going to be higher than the interest rate on a double A bond or an A bond. The reason for that is that the issuer's got to pay more interest in order to have the market have enough interest to buy that bond. That's why sometimes brokers will come in and they'll sell you bonds that have higher yields, and I'll hear people say, oh gosh, I got this higher yield, but then we go look at the quality of the bond, and the quality of the bond is less, and they're trying to compare that yield against the yield on a bond where the quality is much higher. That's not an apples to apples comparison, and not a good basis for a decision. And then also taxable bonds typically have higher yields than tax-exempt bonds. You don't have to pay interest on, tax on your interest on your tax-exempt bonds, or at least not federal tax. And but the corresponding offset on that is then the interest rate isn't quite as high on those investments either. So those are some generalizations about yield. Some of you may have heard about the yield curve, and this is just an illustration of what the yield curve looks like. The yield curve simply just means that the further out you go in maturity, the higher the rate of interest that you're going to receive on the investment. And generally, this is the general shape of the yield curve, where early on, each incremental time period you go out, you earn higher rates of interest, and then eventually that starts to flatten out, and so for going out additional periods, you don't get nearly as much extra interest anymore. So the real trick to this is to try to find the spot here where the yield curve stops steepening so much, it starts flattening out more, and that's typically about the spot where you want to maximize your long-term investments. If you go out here 10 years, and at 10 years you can get 0.1% more interest than you can get at 9 years, does it really make sense to tie your money up for that extra 0.1% when interest rates could go up and leaving you holding an investment that's yielding an inferior amount? So that's how the yield curve looks, and how it steepens at these shorter maturities. Another important point is this: a lot of times people approach their bond investments in this way right here.